That day, Brianna was drunk and a little out of it. Warden Jonathan Farmer was the most attractive person she knew, so a week ago she couldn't even imagine such a situation. Brianna thought it didn't concern her at all. Now she was sitting on the bed, staring at the man in front of her in confusion. Oh, God, what was he going to do? With a slight movement of his hand, Jonathan took off his shirt. He asked the stunned girl if she liked it. She stared at him in bewilderment and asked him what he meant. Jonathan stated that he had cut back on his workouts on purpose to please her. He recalled aloud what Brianna had once said about not liking people who were too pumped up. Huh? And this is the body of someone who cut back on workouts? Unable to take her eyes off of the man, Brianna took stock of the fact that she said it then so as not to ruin the situation. She was referring to the atmosphere between the employees. The girl wanted to clarify this, but Jonathan didn't let her finish. He leaned over to the girl and touched her lips with his. Oh, God, what is he doing? Jonathan, with his magnificent body, a man as gorgeous as the cover of a magazine, was also very gentle. His sensual lips captivated her with their warmth. Brianna could not and would not resist them. Cool company. Working day. Deputy Woods, let's go! A familiar male voice called out to Brianna. Yes, this is Brianna's boss, Jonathan Farmer. When the girl saw him, she smiled welcomingly. This man stood out among the rest. His actor-like appearance and tall stature, like a model, did not leave his persona unnoticed among the female audience. Oh, those eyes! Handsome, what can I say? He is like an areca, a plant that purifies the air inside a dull and stuffy office. When he appeared at work, the employees usually immediately became more cheerful and cheerful. For the female employees in the office, Jonathan is the kind of man who has every chance of becoming a ladies' man. Everyone, absolutely everyone, was under the spell of Jonathan's charm. Brianna was not one of them. Yes, there was another man in her heart. Jonathan to Brianna is just a difficult boss who is meticulous about his work and demands the same of the rest of his subordinates. At work, Brianna thought about work. She walked over to Jonathan and they walked to the elevator together. The elevator pulled up and the doors opened. The chief and his deputy entered the elevator. Yes, Brianna and Jonathan were colleagues within these walls. Nothing more, nothing less. At least, that's what Brianna thought. Jonathan pressed the right button, and the elevator slowly began to descend downward. Brianna looked at the chief and wondered. The man had attracted her attention as well. Now, looking at his neat and handsome face, she thought for some reason that it would be nice if her son looked like that, even though she didn't have a son. And then she pulled herself away from such thoughts. She even felt a little ashamed, because Brianna's boyfriend wasn't losing to this handsome man either. By the way, Pitt hasn't texted her since yesterday. Maybe he was busy, or maybe he had a lot of work to do. Brianna decided to call him after work and ask if they could meet. The girl smiled slyly. And maybe that's the big plus of an office romance? Meanwhile, the elevator arrived at the desired floor. Brianna was so absorbed in her thoughts that she remained standing there when she had to get out. Jonathan turned around and asked her in surprise if she was getting out. Yes, something about Brianna's head was in the clouds. Soon she and the chief were outside. Jonathan walked to his car and gallantly opened the passenger door, as if inviting Brianna to get in. Have a seat, Deputy Woods, he invited, seeing Brianna standing in some confusion. Awkwardly lowering her gaze, the girl still forced herself into the auto. Jonathan waited until Brianna was seated and closed the door behind her. Being in the car, the girl wondered, would the sun rise in the west after this? Or maybe she had won the lottery. Why did Jonathan suddenly open the door for her? The atmosphere in the car was tense. An awkward silence seemed to permeate the air, so that both Jonathan and Brianna could feel the tension. A resounding rumble of thunder lightened the atmosphere a little between the chief and the deputy. Brianna glanced thoughtfully out the window and remarked aloud that it looked like it was going to rain. Indeed it is, the chief replied briefly and dryly. And there was that awkward silence again. They were both uncomfortable, but neither of them dared to continue talking. In the office, Brianna's coworkers had already exhausted her with constant questions about what it was like to go to meetings with the boss. The girls were curious to know if Brianna talked to the boss about personal things. Yes, personal What to do with this atmosphere? Brianna tried to get used to it, but she couldn't get used to it. Meanwhile, it was starting to rain. The drops slammed noisily against the car windows. Brianna suddenly thought that even though it was getting warmer, the rain was making her a little cold. The naked eye could see the girl shivering. Jonathan, without even looking in her direction, as if he sensed Brianna was cold, added heat to the car. "I'm fine, Warden," Brianna said, thinking about how thoughtful her boss was. But the man replied that he was just ventilating because of the humidity. They continued their trip, and the rain kept pouring down. It looked like it was going to last. It was just such a time that it was rare to see anyone on the street on foot. Only endless streams of cars, in which people hid from the weather, snaked along the roads. Brianna felt a little sad. She wanted to go home in this weather. She thought about it and looked out the window. "Oh, what's that?" Brianna perked up dramatically. Something outside the window caught her eye and surprised her. I think she saw one familiar car among the cars outside the window. Isn't that Pitt's car?" The girl squinted, trying to see, but the rain made it very hard to see. "What?" Brianna exclaimed suddenly, forgetting that she was in the car with the chief. Jonathan looked at the girl in surprise. "What?" he interjected, trying to figure out what had hit Brianna so hard. But the girl just apologized, not answering the chief with anything intelligible. Ah, she did manage to look and saw for sure that Pitt's car was there. Brianna had some questions. Where is he going at this time? Is Pitt having a meeting too? Jonathan stopped at a red traffic light. There was a big traffic jam of cars ahead. Now that they've stopped, we can try to get a better look at who's in the car. "Oh, this rain! It makes it hard to see anyway!" God, Brianna tensed. Even though it was raining, you could see someone's silhouette in the front passenger seat in Pitt's auto. Is someone else in there? Brianna wanted to know what he was doing. Who is that next to him? What the girl saw in the next moment made her shudder. It was as if everything inside had turned upside down and frozen. Did it seem like they were kissing? Brianna didn't want to believe her eyes. This can't be happening! Maybe she was just imagining it, and it wasn't Pitt. The traffic light finally turned green. The cars moved off in unison, and the traffic jam slowly began to spread. When she arrived at the place where the meeting was to be held, the first thing Brianna did was go to the restroom. What she saw there on the road felt like it was burning her from the inside out. Brianna wanted to recover and cool down a bit. "Okay, I need to wash up." The girl splashed cold water from the faucet in her face, and with her hands on the sink, froze in a kind of stupor. The water continued to pour, and the girl's heart was scratching. With a trembling hand, Brianna closed the faucet. God, why the excitement? Like images from a terrible dream, dark images from Pitt's car flashed through her mind. He was definitely making out with someone in his arms. How could this happen? Brianna gripped the sink so that her fingernails scraped nastily across the surface. The girl mentally urged herself to calm down and come to her senses, but my brain was stubbornly replaying the images of what I had just seen. We must stop crying, because there was still a lot to do. But it was not so easy to do so. "Sorry to keep you waiting." The girl apologized to the chief as she exited the restroom, but she was surprised to note that the chief wasn't here. At that time, the phone rang in her bag. It was a message from Jonathan. He wrote that he had gone to a meeting and asked Brianna to wait for him at some cafe. The chief promised to contact her when it was over. Went to a meeting with my boss and didn't go into the conference room. It's bad, Brianna thought, and a tear fell right on her smartphone screen. Please excuse me, Chief. Brianna bowed guiltily as she stood before the chief. Jonathan looked at the girl, puzzled. He was clearly concerned about Brianna's condition. What was wrong? What had happened to her? The man only sighed and lowered his gaze, which was full of worry and concern for Brianna. However, Jonathan pretended not to notice anything and asked Brianna to come back. With these words, he went to the car and the girl followed him. Brianna was suddenly ashamed. Shame that she'd given in to her emotions, that she couldn't help it, and that her boss must have noticed. But he still didn't ask what happened. I wonder why. Are you okay, Deputy Woods? Jonathan inquired already in the car. But it was obvious that Brianna wasn't okay. She was pale and visibly shaking. The chief was worried about the girl's condition, but he couldn't understand the reason for it. Everything is awful, but you have to pull yourself together, Brianna thought, trying to switch and distract herself from the painful thoughts. Jonathan Farmer suddenly stated that she could excuse herself if she needed to, or if a girl was unwell. "It's okay, Warden," Brianna replied. She knew that Warden Jonathan Farmer wasn't the type to make remarks. Surely he must be the one in good faith. Brianna had already missed the meeting, wouldn't want to interfere with work just because of that. As painful and bitter as it was now necessary to pull herself together. The girl clenched her eyes for a moment. Opening her eyes, Brianna was surprised. The chief took out a handkerchief and carefully held it out to the girl. Ah, what a polite gesture on his part. "It's nice." The girl took the handkerchief from Jonathan's hands and thanked the man. Soon they were pulling up to the main office. Upon entering the office, Jonathan informed Brianna that he had discounted the meeting details to the post office and asked the girl to check. The girl wondered. After all, this was what she was supposed to do. It was her job. Brianna sat down at her desk and opened her email. So, because the supervisor organized the data, Brianna finished everything quickly and got the job done. Ah, but the mood was hopelessly bad. The girl sank into her thoughts and sighed every now and then, remembering episodes of the past. "No, it's just not possible!" The girl picked up the phone. Brianna sent Pitt a message trying to find out what kind of girl was with him. "Who?" the boy asked, as if nothing had happened. Brianna explained that she was talking about the person he'd made out with in the car today. No reply. "Ah," Pitt only wrote in response to Brianna's message. The girl offered to meet Pitt right away and asked him to come out on the roof. And Brianna and Pitt were soon at the appointed meeting place. Without saying anything and without waiting for an explanation, the girl slapped the guy in the face. "Are you out of your mind, Brianna Woods?" The boy was taken aback at this welcome. Brianna didn't think to answer the bastard's question. Instead, she slapped him again. "Oh, that's powerful!" Pitt's cheek turned red. He stared at Brianna indignantly, as if completely unaware of what was wrong. Looking at the girl who seemed about to explode with anger, Pete wondered again if she had lost her mind. "Confirming the fact that you cheated? You didn't know you'd get a slap in the face?" Brianna asked indignantly. She felt like she was just ready to finish him off right there. "We're at work right now. What are you doing?" Pitt said indignantly. "And what kind of dirty things are you doing?" she asked Brianna, unable to calm down. God, is he kidding me? Sounds like the guy is either a good actor, or he really didn't understand what was going on and why Brianna was so pissed at him. Pitt asked what kind of dirty things she was referring to. Ah, Brianna had never felt so awful before. It would probably be a little easier if he'd at least make excuses and say she'd just gotten it wrong. "Okay, I didn't want to hide it forever. You would have found out about it anyway. I'm sorry, okay?" Pitt suddenly stated as if nothing had happened. The girl just froze at his words. God, had he really said that? "I'm sorry," repeated Brianna in a trembling voice. The girl then pulled herself together and smiled evilly, thanking the guy for revealing what trash he really was before it was too late. Oh, she had almost married such a scoundrel. Any words were now unnecessary. Anything Pitt said now would be of no consequence. "Good thing we didn't book the wedding hall," the girl said, still smiling. And only deep in her soul something very painfully shattered. Yes, that trust and love she thought was real, shattered, scarred her soul in a way that made her want to scream. But Brianna held firm. Memories flashed through her mind like images from an old movie. Pitt on his knee, proposing to her. Wow, he'd said he only believed Brianna. Ha ha! And as it turned out, he couldn't be trusted himself. "What are you doing?" asked Pitt, seeing the girl hovering beside her. Oh, how foolish she was, how unjustifiably gullible. "By the way, Pitt, does that girl know too?" Brianna asked suddenly. Pitt didn't know what to answer to that. The bastard seemed to be living a double life. He was very comfortable, and he wasn't going to let anyone know. Brianna remarked aloud that if Pitt liked that girl so much, he should have broken up with her first. What's the problem with just talking like adults? "Huh, you have to say all that?" asked Pitt with a wry grin. He emphasized that if a person doesn't respond to you, you can guess that they've lost interest in you. What am I, a psychic? How do you know a person isn't a jerk if they don't speak? Brianna parried. Pitt stared angrily at the girl. Brianna, meanwhile, had decided to kill him morally and said that it was possible because Pitt was a jerk. That's why she didn't know what he was really like. How can a person read the thoughts of garbage? Brianna asked, and stated that she felt sorry for the girl who didn't know anything. The girl said all this with a smile on her face so that Pitt couldn't see how much it hurt her. And only when she turned away, already leaving, she was able to let the tears flow. You dirty bastard! Brianna spent the rest of the day and the next at home. It was naive to think that the walls of her home would heal her, but at least she was safe here, without the stares and stupid questions. Yes, the girl decided it would be best for her to take the day off. At home, Brianna went through all the stages from denial to acceptance. Of course, at first, the girl couldn't understand why it had happened to her in the first place. Then she reassured herself that it was good to find out now. The mood swings were frequent and uncontrollable. In the end, it all came down to the fact that Pitt was Brianna's first love and her first relationship with him. The girl's eyes were swollen with endless sobs. Oh, there's a message. Who could it be? It was a coworker of Dinara's. She wanted to know if Brianna was okay. The girl read the message in the background without opening it and turned the phone screen down. She didn't feel like talking to anyone or answering anything. And why was she texting her at all? God, what the hell is going on? The phone started buzzing nonstop. Who the hell is this? Brianna yelled in exasperation and picked up her phone again. Oh, that was Department Head Lara Sim on the phone. Okay, we need to exhale and calmly take this call. Brianna picked up the phone. Deputy Woods, what are you doing here all of a sudden? Came a voice on the other side of the phone. While the boss asked in a concerned voice what was wrong and where it hurt, the girl couldn't find the words to explain, nor was she ready to discuss it yet. Tears ran down her cheek again. As it turns out, the rumors had already spread, because Lara knew full well that Pitt had cheated on Brianna. So that's why Dinara texted her. Yeah, that's hardly something you can hide in the office. I thought it was weird. I didn't seem to hear from you that you guys broke up, Lara said, and added that Pitt was dating Dinara. Oh my God, Brianna froze for a moment. She suddenly remembered that correspondence with Pitt where she'd asked about who he'd made out with in the car then. His incomprehensible answer. There was no way she could have guessed that girl was Brianna. The girl remembered everything down to the smallest detail, and how the appointment with Pitt had been arranged, and how she'd been going to that meeting as if in a fog. Near the elevator, Brianna was called out. The girl was in the midst of her own worries and thoughts, and didn't really want to talk to anyone. However, she did turn around. Dinara Roberts? What does she want? Are you going home? Brianna asked out of politeness. Dinara then replied that she was going home, but since her boyfriend said he had something to do abruptly, she wanted to wait for him. Boyfriend. So you had a boyfriend. I knew it. Brianna replied to her coworker with a smile. Dinara looked happy that day. Her eyes were shining. The girl confessed to Brianna that she actually got a boyfriend recently. Brianna congratulated her coworker. She was very sad because she was on her way to break up, and someone else's relationship was just beginning. If she had known at that moment that the end of her relationship was someone else's beginning. Dinara remarked that she somehow felt like she and Brianna Woods had become friends after being congratulated like that by Deputy Brianna Woods. Such a thing should be congratulated, Brianna replied, and wished the new couple happiness. Dinara thanked her newfound friend and suggested that they have lunch together sometime later. Brianna replied that she didn't mind in principle. Can I invite my boyfriend too? I'll introduce you two, Dinara asked. The question seemed strange to Brianna at the time. She didn't understand why she would be socializing with Dinara's boyfriend, and smiling aloud, wondered if she would be bothering them. Meanwhile, the elevator arrived, and Brianna wished Dinara to be more careful on the way home. Dinara smiled sweetly and wished the deputy the same. Back to the day of Brianna's domestic misery. So a text came in from Dinara that read, Deputy Woods, are you okay? I heard you didn't show up for work today. Reading the message from this person and remembering the words she had recently heard from Lara Sim on the phone, Brianna felt uneasy. The girl suddenly remembered Brianna's words that she and she could be friends. Already completely out of her mind, Brianna laughed wickedly. It was ironic to be friends with her ex-boyfriend's girlfriend. It seemed to the girl that everyone around her was laughing at her and that fate itself was mocking her. Very funny, Brianna said angrily to herself. Meanwhile, Jonathan Farmer was looking at something on his computer at his desk. Oh, I think he went to the houseplant website. Unexpected. He wants to buy a Sansevieria? I wonder if it's for the office or the house. The man read the information about the flower once more and smirked enigmatically. Without thinking long, he clicked the buy button. After recovering a bit and getting over the emotions of stress, Brianna went to work in the office. Act natural, Brianna Woods, natural. She mentally encouraged herself. It was still disgusting. I just wish I could control myself. The girl entered the office and took the elevator to the 17th floor. As the elevator went up, Brianna tried not to think about anything. Fortunately, the girl was lucky and didn't run into Pitt. Except there were other moments that were just as unfortunate. Brianna Woods' appearance in the office seemed to draw everyone's attention. No wonder, because most likely everyone in the building already knew her sad story. As soon as the girl entered, she was stared at from behind the desks by curious colleagues. Yeah, Pitt had gotten her in a lot of trouble. Brianna had made up her mind that from now on she would have no more office romances at work. In her phone conversation with Lara, Brianna learned that the female employees had been discussing with Dinara about her affair with Pitt. It was painful for the girl to listen to all this, but the interest was a little stronger, and Brianna still did not stop the conversation. When those idiots were caught, Dinara was drenched in cold sweat and had a hard time controlling her emotions in front of the other female employees. Lara enthusiastically shared the news. It was hard to believe that there were people who didn't know that Brianna was dating Pitt Wesley. Remembering that conversation with her coworker, Brianna walked over to the chief's desk. Jonathan immediately turned his attention to the girl. With a nod of his head, the chief greeted Brianna. The girl smiled back and greeted her superior with the same nod. Brianna walked to her workstation. She just wanted to fall under the ground. Wow, that was embarrassing. She felt embarrassed and ashamed in front of her boss. After all, in front of Supervisor Jonathan Farmer, she wanted to be someone who could keep work and personal life 100% separate. But it looks like that woman kissing Pitt Wesley so passionately was exactly Dinara Roberts. Thinking about it, Brianna suddenly pictured that picture of them kissing clearly in her head. Nervously clutching her purse with her hand, the girl thought that Pitt was now officially recognized as the cool company's trash. If you think about it, those two are from the same department. So Pitt could have fallen in love with a girl younger than him while they were working together? These thoughts kept Brianna's mind on her own. It pissed her off that all these details were starting to come out. Obviously, Dinara Roberts couldn't have been unaware of Brianna and Pitt's relationship. But I wonder what she was thinking when she offered to have lunch with her boyfriend. Though how on earth could an adequate person understand what was going on in the brains of a deranged person? Brianna couldn't help but think about it. Getting ready for work and sorting out her purse, the girl thought about one thing. Oh, what's that in my purse? A handkerchief! Yeah, that's the handkerchief Jonathan Farmer gave her there after the meeting. Brianna thought it wouldn't hurt to return that handkerchief to the supervisor. She looked at the man whose desk was not far from her workstation. Jonathan was staring passionately into his monitor and was busy working. But suddenly, as if sensing Brianna's gaze on him, the man broke away from the computer and looked in her direction. Brianna turned away abruptly. No, perhaps now was not the right time. The girl decided to work first. Yes, indeed, Brianna could use some focus. Only the girl tuned in as she suddenly got a message in her mail. Deputy Woods, are you okay? Worried Lara Sim. Looks like she's the only one Brianna could talk to. The girl thanked Lara and assured her that she was already fine. The supervisor said that Brianna could rest for a couple more days, although she realized that it would be difficult for a girl of her temperament to do so. Brianna once again said she was fine, and Lara asked to address her in private correspondence in a less formal manner. Yes, Lately, their communication was becoming more and more like a friendly one, though Brianna herself felt that whatever her and Lara's relationship was now, it would be difficult for her to refer to her as just a friend, even after leaving the company. Well, the girl realized that she had a lot of work to do again today, so she had to deal with it quickly. It really was a lot of work. Somehow, Brianna finally finished it all. She closed her eyes tiredly and stretched to relieve the fatigue in her back and shoulders. Okay, everything that needs to be done has been done. All that's left is to give it away. With a quick glance, Brianna went over her work one more time to see if everything was correct. Soon she handed the folder with the report to her boss. He took the folder and continued to stare at his monitor, not even turning to Brianna. He did open that folder, though, and looked at the report carefully. Jonathan saw the outline of the report Brianna had given him in front of him, but it was as if he was looking through it and thinking about something of his own. He seems puzzled about something. I wonder what it is. Jonathan was very short on words. Hearing no questions or comments, Brianna realized she was free to go and headed to her workstation. Maybe it was the fact that Brianna was in front of a man she respected that made her feel pathetic. She felt sad for some reason. Oh, Lara Sim wrote to her again. The supervisor invited Brianna to have lunch with her. The girl decided not to refuse. She could use the distraction. Looks like the superintendent's the only one thinking about her. Well, at least that's the case. Brianna agreed to Lara's offer and walked out of the office. Walking away, the girl didn't even notice something sparkling under her desk. Oh, what's that? It seems the girl has some surprises ahead of her that she doesn't even realize yet. Wearing such pretty shoes today? Lara gushed as soon as she saw Brianna. The girl replied that she just wanted to try to cheer herself up that way. Brianna admitted that she had never worn the shoes since she bought them. Lara complimented Brianna on how good she looked, and the style suited her very well. Wear something like this more often, the superintendent added. Brianna smiled. Kind words are what a person really needs sometimes to take their mind off depression. The girls had a great time together at lunch and were able to have a heart-to-heart talk. Brianna returned to the office in a good mood. Lunch passed very quickly, and with Lara somehow even unnoticed. It was time to get back to work. Brianna sat down at her computer. The girl was yawning a lot. It was strange. She'd been drinking coffee, so why was she so sleepy? Oh, a familiar male voice suddenly called out to Brianna, and the girl's sleep faded away. It was a voice not to be confused with anyone else's. The chief approached Brianna's desk. The girl turned and stared at the man questioningly. God, Brianna thought. At first, he seemed displeased about something. The expression on his face was sometimes hard to read and figure out what emotion he was having right now. "What's the matter?" asked Brianna fearfully and jumped up abruptly from her seat. Jonathan replied that he had reviewed the girl's report and handed her back her folder. God, Brianna felt ashamed. Why had she suddenly jumped up like that? What a disgrace. The chief looked at the girl's desk, puzzled. What is he going to find here? Then his gaze lingered on something else. By the way, isn't he dead already? Jonathan asked, pointing his finger at the withered potted flower on Brianna's desk. Shameful, of course, but she couldn't even tell exactly when that eucalyptus had died. Brianna thought she'd been diligently watering it, but apparently the girl does not have the proper skills and abilities to grow flowers. After thinking for a bit, the girl found nothing better to do but answer that she just wanted to make some sort of herbarium. You know you have to dry live flowers to do that, Brianna added with a smile. Geez, wasn't that a pretty delusional excuse she'd come up with? Jonathan looked at the girl in surprise and wondered aloud if she had such extravagant features. But what about, I didn't know that, so I ordered you a new one, he added, which puzzled Brianna. Catching the girl's questioning look, Jonathan asked her to try not to kill the plant this time, but to grow it. As soon as he said that, a courier entered the office with a box in his hands. The chief showed him where to leave the order. The courier once again asked Jonathan for his first and last name. The chief replied that he was the one who had placed the order and asked the boy to leave the box on Brianna's desk. The girl was handed a box in her hand, and she sat there with a dazed look, unable to understand what was even going on here. "Would you throw away a flower that's already dead?" the chief asked hopefully. Brianna was still in a kind of bewilderment. Jonathan looked at the girl and wondered if she was okay. Brianna was distracted from her thoughts and looked at the chief puzzled. The recent events in the girl's life with memories sometimes put her in a stupor. Brianna looked sadly at her withered bush. Yes, she had to get rid of it anyway. It wasn't her fault, but it was Pitt Wesley's gift to her. Brianna's first thought was to examine the box. Sansevieria? Oh, the box even provides an air hole! Embrace this opportunity to start over, Deputy Woods, the chief said suddenly. And a chance to grow a flower. He immediately added and smiled. In addition, the man added that this plant does not need frequent watering. Ha! How thoughtful! He even thought that Brianna might forget about watering. Well, it's a hardy plant that should suit a girl like Brianna. Jonathan pointed out that it wouldn't die so easily. Meanwhile, in some unknown work chat room, there was an active discussion about Brianna and her situation. Geez, so Deputy Woods got stabbed in the back? Someone asked, to which someone replied that Brianna probably got bored with Pitt and switched to Dinara. Someone wrote praise odes to Dinara, calling her cute. Someone on the contrary considered her act disgusting. And someone else noted that although Deputy Pitt is a handsome man, but there is only one prince in their company. At this time, Chief Jonathan continued to stand by Brianna's desk and stare at her intently. Brianna was a little confused by this. Jonathan just kept his eyes on her. What's wrong with him? Why is he acting like that? Brianna smiled back at the chief and strained to think that the man seemed to be crazy. Thank you, leader. However, you shouldn't have done that, the girl remarked as she looked at the box of flour. Well, good. Take care of him, Deputy Woods, Jonathan finally said and stepped away from her desk. The chief returned to his workplace, and his co-workers glanced at Brianna every now and then. It seemed that the girl was the #1 object of office gossip. Brianna noticed the increased activity of her colleagues sitting nearby and looked in that direction. Everyone watching her immediately pretended to be working hard. It seems that the chief's behavior seemed strange to the others as well. Well, Brianna decided not to pay attention to anyone else and opened the box with the flower. She looked at the small potted plant, carefully packaged, and thought, did the manager personally choose this flower? Oh, but that's really weird. An executive whose facial expression doesn't change under any circumstances suddenly chose something especially for Brianna? The girl found it hard to believe. Brianna set the pot next to her monitor and mentally noted that people would probably start whispering endlessly about it. The girl was already the target of discussion because of Pitt Wesley and Dinara Roberts. And now this situation with the chief. Yes, indeed, there was talk of Brianna, Pitt, and Dinara at every corner of the company. I saw Deputy Woods today. I immediately felt so heavy in my heart, one employee shared with her coworkers in the hallway. She didn't go to work yesterday, so I told her all about it, the other replied. Someone was curious about Dinara. But as it turned out, she was walking around as if nothing had happened and making eyes at everyone. Shouldn't we report this couple to HR? One girl asked her colleagues in the elevator. She was told that Deputy Woods and Pitt weren't even married, so there was nothing to report. But not everyone agreed with the answer, believing that even though it happened outside of marriage, it is still called cheating, which contributes to more demoralization of employees in the company. Let's just report it, and the HR department will handle it themselves, one of the girls kept insisting. Oh, it seems that these words were heard by Dinara, who was not far from the elevator at that moment. The girl was wary. Should I report it? To the Human Resources Department? Somehow she felt that they were talking about her, even though Dinara hadn't heard her name in this part of the conversation. The workday continued, and despite the office drama and intrigue, everyone had to get their work done. Brianna got a message from a coworker. She was invited for coffee. That suggestion was just in time, for the girl was just thinking that coffee would be nice. A little while later, Brianna was already sitting at a table in a cafe. Oh, someone loudly called the girl's name. Brianna looked around excitedly. It was Samantha and Lily, Brianna's coworkers. The girls walked over to Brianna's table and sat down next to her. Brianna, is it true? Lily asked suddenly. Brianna didn't understand what was being asked of her and asked what was meant. The girls smiled and stared at Brianna, as if trying to explain with their gazes what they were talking about. Did Supervisor Farmer really give you a gift? Lily asked again. Everything happened just as Brianna thought it would. Word of her situation spread in an instant. Brianna's silence was taken by her colleagues as an affirmative answer to Lily's question. And the fact that he threw away a dead plant in person, is that true? Lily persisted. Brianna smiled and replied that the delivery man had taken it with him. And yet, he even found out your flower died, didn't he? Lily pointed out. The girl declared admiringly that she wanted to join their team as well. By the way, have you heard? Things have changed drastically now, Lily whispered. Brianna looked at the girl questioningly. Lily asked if Brianna knew how sorry everyone felt for her when that news broke. Do you remember Supervisor Jonathan getting close to other employees or giving them gifts since he joined the company? Lily asked in a conspiratorial voice. I didn't want to pretend to be bothered by this while whispering behind your back, so now I can ask with a light heart. So, is head Jonathan Farmer seriously in love with you? Lily shouted and shook Brianna, demanding an answer. Smiling embarrassedly, the girl replied that of course not, and the chief had just given her a plant. Looks like poor Woods has been on everyone's lips for a week. Well, maybe it was for the best. The girls couldn't stop marveling and admiring that the chief himself gave a flower to Brianna. They thought it was so cool and exciting. Brianna thought about it. Well, when Head Farmer gives a gift to someone like her, it really could be misinterpreted. Taking another sip of coffee, it suddenly hit Brianna. Wait a second. Did he really give her a flower to create a new topic of discussion? It seemed like he wanted those dirty gossips about her to go away. If that is indeed the case, and Brianna's guess is correct, then Jonathan is much better than she had previously thought. Suddenly, a female voice called out to Brianna. The colleagues and Brianna looked in that direction. Oh, it's Dinara herself. She's looking a little glum. Why would that be? What does she want? Dinara walked over and asked Deputy Woods if they could talk to her. We should probably go then, Lily said, and looked meaningfully at her friend across the room, making it clear that these two should be left alone. But Dinara stated that they could stay as it wouldn't be long. I apologize, Deputy Woods, I really didn't know. That you and Deputy Pitt were in a relationship, the girl blurted out and gave a guilty look. Dinara emphasized that if she had known, she would never have gone out with him. Brianna looked at the girl in surprise. Dinara was silent for a moment and sighed sadly. Letting a tear fall, the girl remarked that she too was a victim in this situation. No one had realized yet if she could be trusted. Anyway, it was ignorant of me, so please forgive me, Dinara added. Brianna couldn't believe the sincerity of that apology. A victim? She called herself a victim? Brianna smiled. Dinara Roberts. What are you trying to explain to me right now? Brianna inquired, and looked the girl straight in the eye. Brianna emphasized that nothing connects her and the deputy from now on, and she doesn't care at all who Pitt is dating or what he does. The girl also pointed out that Dinara and Pitt had been quietly dating before, so Brianna couldn't understand why Dinara suddenly needed her approval. The girl cried and explained that she really just wanted to get close to Brianna and learn a lot from her. Even though I haven't told you this before, I truly respect you, Dinara admitted. The girl also reiterated that if she knew the two of them were in a close relationship, she wouldn't have accepted Deputy Pitt's confession. Brianna didn't know how to react to that yet. She clutched her coffee glass nervously in her hands. Oh, so Pitt had confessed to her first too? So you genuinely respect me, but you weren't even aware of who I was in a relationship with for a whole year? Brianna wondered incredulously. The girl wondered aloud that all of Dinara's coworkers knew about it, and she didn't. Haven't you been working at this company for about 6 months? Brianna asked. The girl suddenly stood up and walked over to Diana and declared that it was all for the best after all. Beloved hid that he was already in a relationship and even confessed his feelings to you. Brianna stated the fact, thus making it clear to Dinara that her boyfriend was the ultimate trash. But she also added that even though Pitt turned out to be trash, it was up to Dinara whether to accept him or not. Well, now Dinara is in a dead-end situation. I wonder what she will decide to do. If that's it, I'll go, Brianna said, and asked Lily and Samantha if they were going with her. After that meeting in the cafe, Samantha and Lily had a lot of emotions. Texting each other in Messenger, Lily marveled at how Dinara could lie so brazenly. However, both girls marveled at how cleverly Brianna had managed to take down the sneaky fox. Brianna was exhausted from the emotional swings that had been going on in her life lately. However, she had to work, which she did right after lunch with her coworkers. Brianna looked at her monitor and wondered. Ha 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 ha! Such a strange message came into her mail from someone. At that moment, someone suddenly called out to Brianna. "I think there's been a misunderstanding!" came Dinara's voice, and Brianna was grabbed by the arm. The girl jerked dazedly and turned around. "What misunderstanding?" Brianna asked, and abruptly took her hand away. Dinara stated that Pitt thought like he and Brianna had broken up. "You haven't seen or contacted him in days, and generally your relationship hasn't been going well," Dinara began to ramble. Brianna was taken aback by her words. The girl reminded Dinara that she had said before that she didn't know Pitt was dating her. Dinara twitched. Brianna couldn't understand. Was this girl really that stupid? Or was she trying to weave some kind of intrigue? A little stammering, Dinara explained that it wasn't quite like that. From what she said, it seemed that she knew about their relationship, but thought that they had already broken up. Brianna realized Dinara was stupid after all. But then, how did she get into the company? Brianna laughed and noticed that Dinara seemed to be trying to say that the two of them hadn't done anything wrong, except she didn't need Dinara's excuses, because it wouldn't make a difference anyway. Brianna wondered, was Pitt Wesley really that good? Well, for a girl like Dinara, that kind of guy seemed like the best fit. He has tall stature, good looks, impeccable self-esteem, a prestigious job, and his parents are high-ranking officials in the government. Ha! He's a very eligible groom, every girl's dream. Every time he went to the student club, all eyes were on him. And that was good for him. Pitt is the kind of guy who likes to have fun and be the center of attention. When you think about it that way, Brianna was even crazier when she thought about marrying a man like that. Thinking about all of this, Brianna suddenly realized that it was a good thing she had broken up with him before it was too late. So the girl seemed to have gotten all of today's work done. All that was left was to make a copy, and she could go home. But what's wrong with the printer? Brianna rebooted it for the third time, but it kept giving an error for some reason. The girl checked the paper loading compartment. There was no end of paper. Okay, we need to check another compartment. It's jammed and won't open. Oh, damn it! The girl tapped the printer in a puzzled manner. Why wouldn't it open? It seemed that even he had decided to mock her today. As sad as it is, it appears that Brianna will have to stay late because of this. As she continued her futile attempts to figure out the printer, the girl replayed Dinara's phrases in her head as she talked about thinking that she thought Brianna and Pitt had broken up. Then the girl also remembered Pitt's own words. "If you haven't contacted your partner for a long time, you should have realized that his feelings have already changed." From all these memories, tears started dripping from Brianna's eyes again. The girl firmly decided that she would not allow any more office romances in her life. He's going to break like that. Someone's male voice suddenly sounded behind me. Somehow the chief had walked over unnoticed and was watching Brianna's manipulation of the printer in a puzzled manner. Brianna just froze in surprise. Once again, Jonathan Farmer has come along at just such a moment. Brianna's only dream at this point was for the chief to just leave, and that was it. But Jonathan didn't think of leaving. The man noticed that the print seemed to be broken. And then he added that he would have to buy a new one, expensive and with good functionality. After saying that, the chief entered the office and, closing the door behind him, asked if Brianna would cry over some printer. "Or was it that cheating trash that made you cry again?" Jonathan asked suddenly. Brianna certainly hadn't expected that from him. It was the first time the girl had ever heard an executive speak so bluntly on the subject of his personal life. Apparently it's just as Brianna thought it would be. And the chief thinks this whole situation has gotten in the way of work. It is understandable, because the girl could not even take part in the meeting the day before yesterday because of what happened. And this scandal around her person and Pitt Wesley is going around the whole company. While Brianna thought about what to answer, the chief stepped closer to her. I apologize. Something like this N will happen again, Brianna said, with her gaze lowered. Jonathan suddenly said that if she was going to cry, he could give her his handkerchief. Oh dear. Brianna suddenly froze in bewilderment. Oh, how embarrassing. She had not returned his handkerchief, though she had intended to. As if reading the girl's mind, Jonathan said there was no need to return the handkerchief and asked Brianna to just accept it. It's all right, Supervisor Farmer. I'm sorry if I made you worry. After all, nothing has happened that requires your concern, the girl pointed out. Jonathan looked into Brianna's eyes and asked if she was sure of what she was saying. What if it bothers me? Declared Jonathan suddenly. Oh, what does that mean? Those words puzzled Brianna. The girl wondered if she had gotten it right, and the chief was concerned about her breaking up with her boyfriend. Sure, Jonathan replied in a confident tone. Oh, Brianna just didn't know how to respond to that. The girl stubbornly didn't believe and didn't want to notice that she could be sympathetic to this man. Jonathan noticed aloud that Brianna was crying again and wondered if she had any regrets. Brianna admitted that she thought the chief had seen everything for himself that day, too. If I still had regrets after what I've seen, I'd be completely weak-willed, the girl added, and confidently declared that she had completely fallen out of love with Pitt. Brianna then admitted that if she was honest, she was crying with anger at her fate. The chief rubbed his chin with his hand and said thoughtfully that he was glad if Brianna had no regrets. Brianna still couldn't understand the meaning of his words. She glanced at the chief once more, trying to see his emotions. Is he smiling? Brianna suddenly felt like the man was just mocking her. But the boss suggested that they end it there and asked if Brianna wanted to leave work with him. Jonathan also added that they would need to put in a purchase order for a new printer. Were you laughing just now? Asked Brianna the question that troubled her most. Jonathan hid a smile, and only the go eyes still shone with a satisfied gleam. The man didn't deny it and honestly admitted that he did laugh. Brianna wondered in bewilderment what he found so funny. In her mind, she was trying to figure out if it made sense that he was laughing at her in this situation. Jonathan explained that he had laughed because something long-awaited and good had happened. His words confused the girl completely. What long-awaited one? She clarified. And the chief replied that he meant her breakup with her boyfriend. Wow. And he said all this with a completely calm face. Glancing at his watch, Jonathan suddenly admitted that he had been wanting to tell her something for a year now. Why don't we have dinner together tonight? The chief suggested. Brianna's mind was a mess. Is he out of his mind? How do you mean he was waiting for her to break up? And what were those words he hadn't been able to say to her for a year? Supervisor, I don't understand at all what you're trying to tell me right now. Are you saying you've been waiting for this? Did you like the news of my breakup so much that you decided to make fun of me? Brianna peppered the chief with a whole bunch of questions. She wondered if her relationship had somehow affected the outcome of her work. Tears began to gather in her eyes again. The girl suddenly thought she understood why the supervisor reacted like that. Probably unable to separate work and personal life, she couldn't hold back her tears. What supervisor wouldn't find that funny? Oh, God! He suddenly moved even closer and touched his hand to the girl's cheek. Brianna seemed to stop breathing altogether. What is he doing? Jonathan, it seems indecently close. But he just pulled out his handkerchief and looked intently into the girl's eyes. The man gently wiped away her tears. Good thing I brought a handkerchief with me, he remarked with a smile. Brianna stared dumbfounded at the chief and couldn't say a word. Only Jonathan didn't want to miss the opportunity and asked if she would mind having dinner with him instead of crying. No, leader, I'll leave first, exclaimed Brianna, quickly scurried away. Evening was coming. The sun had already disappeared behind the tall silhouettes of high-rise buildings. Brianna was taking public transportation back home. She had a lot to think about. Before she could recover from the shock of her breakup with Pitt, she was faced with a new shock. Memories of his recent conversation with the chief would not leave his mind. God, his eyes. They were so close, and he seemed to see right through her with his gaze. His hands. Jonathan touched her cheek so gently with his fingers. Why was he doing that? These reflections made the girl blush. God, this is crazy! Wrapped in inexplicable sensations, the girl reached her home. On automatic, Brianna opened the door and entered the apartment. Ah, the native walls. The girl sighed tiredly and went inside. Carelessly dropping her shoes, Brianna's first order of business was to the kitchen. Water! I need a drink of water right away! Ah, the excitement made my mouth feel dry. Drinking the whole glass greedily, the girl thumped it soundly on the table. Truth be told, she's not sure she was annoyed about these problems at work. And if you look back on the manager's actions now, you'll realize that the flower and his benevolence were a selfless gesture. But then what does it all mean? Was he doing all this because he was interested in her? With those thoughts in mind, Brianna went to take a shower. Except why did all this happen right after she broke up with a man from the same company? I couldn't understand at all what was going on. Ah, so much had happened in one day. You just need to go back to your normal life, as if nothing had happened. That's the decision the girl made for herself. New workdays at the cool company. Brianna entered the office and stopped timidly in front of the front door. Okay, she tried to adjust and just act normal. Yes, she should try to act as if nothing had happened between her and Supervisor Jonathan. Oh, the chief's already at work. When she saw him, it was as if everything in her soul had turned upside down. The mood of acting as if nothing had happened began to fade away. Jonathan Farmer glanced at Brianna and greeted her with a nod. The girl tried to move quickly past him, not looking at the chief. She mentally repeated to herself many times that nothing had happened, but time after time the images of yesterday, when Jonathan had been so close to her, came back to her mind. On autopilot, Brianna made her way to her workstation. The girl quickly sat down at her computer and started pretending to get to work right away. Great! It seemed natural, she reassured herself in her thoughts. But her mind kept telling her that it wasn't natural at all. Please come this way, the chief invited someone in. There was some noise and clamor coming from the corridor. Why do we need a printer? Someone asked. And Jonathan replied that he was going to write about it in the morning. He explained that their printer had broken, so they had sent a new one. Brianna listened to the conversation curiously. He'd said he'd ordered a new printer just last night. It was strange that it had been delivered so quickly. The girl looked at her chief and thought of one thing she still had to admit. Ah, it's a pleasure to see how quickly new documents are printed. What a relief that the printer is working well. Brianna was enjoying her work and the sounds of the new device in the office when suddenly the boss walked over and pressed a button. The girl looked at him in surprise and wondered what he was doing. Jonathan was silent, and Brianna asked fearfully what was wrong. Jonathan Farmer simply asked if she wasn't going to have dinner with him tonight, too. The girl sighed heavily. What was he talking about? I'll tell it like it is. Why do I even have to have dinner with you? Brianna blurted out flatly. Because I'm interested in you, he replied calmly. Brianna couldn't believe her ears. God, could he really be serious right now? She froze and stared dumbfounded at the chief. For a moment, Brianna felt the blood rush to her cheeks and heat spill over her entire body. The girl asked the chief to repeat what he had just said. I said I was interested in you, Miss Woods, Jonathan repeated without the slightest hesitation or embarrassment. Brianna looked embarrassed. If you're teasing me, please stop, she asked quietly. Jonathan wondered if he looked like the kind of person who would joke about something like that. Brianna stared at the man. She hadn't been prepared for a conversation like this, and not with him. Of course, she'd always known the chief was an outspoken man, but Brianna hadn't expected him to be so direct with her. The girl mused aloud that the chief had been rather rude yesterday, so she couldn't help but be curious as to why Jonathan was now saying he was interested in her. Brianna had just had time to say it didn't make sense when the chief suddenly turned to the girl, calling her by name. He leisurely approached Brianna at a fairly close distance. Ah, how much confidence there was in his words and gestures, and even in his gait. You don't know what I've been through, Jonathan emphasized. For some reason, there was a sense of pain in his words. That's just what it all meant. What is he talking about? Jonathan admitted that he distinctly remembered how uncomfortable he'd felt during a business trip last year when he'd heard about Brianna getting close to Pitt Wesley. Honestly, I thought you'd be dating for about 6 months, and was surprised when I found out you'd been dating for over a year, the chief commented. The man then added with a smile that he was happy now because Brianna had finally broken up with the type. God, it was weird hearing those words from the chief. Brianna could never even think that he liked her. His confession made the girl blush with embarrassment. They stared into each other's eyes in silence for a while. "Miss Woods?" the chief addressed the girl. She looked at the man questioningly, waiting to see what he would tell her next. Jonathan smiled sweetly and suggested that Brianna go home together tonight. The chief emphasized that there were many things he wanted to tell her about. Brianna looked rather confused. All of this just didn't fit in her head. The workday was like a blur. Brianna couldn't work properly. Thoughts about the chief and this morning's conversation with him did not give her any rest. At some point, the girl began to think that she was dreaming, and everything that had happened was just a dream. That's right. It was a dream. An incredibly vivid and realistic dream. "Miss Woods?" the chief called out to the girl, making her convinced of the reality of what was happening. Brianna answered the chief's call, and he noticed that he had sent her an email. Jonathan asked the girl to check her email. "Okay, I'll check, thanks," the girl replied, mentally chiding herself for being so inattentive to work today. What a shame. Suddenly remembering Jonathan's words about how much he'd been through, the girl looked out from behind her desk, trying to find the chief with her gaze. What does that mean? So the chief was interested in her, but didn't want to get close because she was seeing someone else? While Brianna was thinking, looking at Jonathan, he turned and caught her gaze. There was a question in his eyes. The girl blushed and turned away. But it was too late. I didn't even have to pretend, because there was a lot of work to do. Why did the report have to be submitted today? Brianna sighed doomedly. No need to tune in. Brianna decided that work was work and set her mind to work hard. Yeah, you gotta learn to separate work and personal life. After a little while, Brianna Woods approached the chief's workstation and addressed him. "Here, please check," the girl said quietly and held out a folder with the report to the chief. God, though Brianna tried not to give the appearance of worry, her hands gave away the girl's condition with a treacherous shiver. Jonathan noticed this and smirked for some reason. In a calm tone, he asked Brianna not to be so nervous. But no words could change the girl's state of mind. And how can you not be nervous when you're in front of a man who, as it turns out, has a soft spot for you, and even if it's the boss? Brianna tried to justify herself by saying that she was shivering because it was a little chilly because of the air conditioning. How ridiculous. Would Jonathan believe it? The man offered to let Brianna borrow his jacket to keep warm. The girl brushed it off negatively, and after thanking the chief, said she didn't need it. Okay, she's been standing by his desk for too long. Brianna decided it would be better if she moved farther away. The chief silently escorted the girl with a smiling look. He loved the way she looked embarrassed. It's 17:56 on the clock. It is nearing the end of the working day. Brianna had long since gotten through all of today's tasks and done all of her work. It was already possible to go home. The girl decided to see how Jonathan Farmer was doing. He's still working. So focused, Brianna suddenly thought. I wondered if there was a woman who would refuse to have dinner with Jonathan. With those thoughts in mind, Brianna took off her badge and headed for the exit. She was not in the right mood right now, for, as it was, she was still stunned by her breakup with Pitt Wesley. Besides, she hadn't gotten a sense from Jonathan that he was serious when he'd said he was interested. After all, he had confessed as soon as he and Pitt had broken up. Brianna was already uneasy about that flower, and if everyone knew she and the chief were going out to dinner, it could become a hot topic again. "Hey, Brianna Woods!" a familiar voice called out to the girl. "Oh, don't tell me it's Pitt!" The girl turned around at the voice and seemed to freeze in place. Yes, it was Pitt. He frowned and asked Brianna in an angry tone what she had said to Dinara Roberts. "What did you tell Dinara that she wanted to break up with me?" Pitt repeated his question. Brianna advised the guys to solve their problems on their own. Then she asked why Pitt keeps coming to her and making scandals. They were standing by the elevator, weren't they? Brianna knew it wouldn't be long before the elevator pulled up and people came out. Yeah, she never thought she'd run into Pitt at a time like this. Hey, do you still have feelings for me? Pitt suddenly dumbfounded the girl with such a question. The girl was puzzled and asked him what he had said. Pitt inquired if Brianna hadn't told Dinara to break up with him because she still had feelings. If you cheated on me and transferred to another department, just keep quiet. Don't be pushy. What's wrong with you? Pitt couldn't calm down. Brianna didn't know what he meant. The girl said in her heart that she just didn't have the words. Meanwhile, the elevator arrived at the 17th floor. Brianna Woods, admit it. Do you still have feelings for me? Pitt asked insistently just as the elevator doors opened. Oh no, everyone in the elevator heard his words. Seriously, is there any other man who will put up with and date you? Pitt already asked haughtily with a sneer. While Brianna mentally boiled over, Pitt called the girl a workaholic and emphasized that she always put her boyfriend on the back burner and he only tolerated it. Brianna was just in shock. She couldn't believe she was dating a man like that. Deputy Woods? The chief's voice came from behind him. Pitt stared dumbfounded at Jonathan. He hadn't expected to see him here. Brianna hadn't expected him to be here either. Yeah, you sure know how to pick a bad time, Brianna Woods. The chief looked at Brianna. He seemed to be looking only at her and not at anyone else. Have you been waiting long? Asked Jonathan loudly. The chief's words were immediately noticed by everyone nearby. People began to look at each other and whisper, but everyone was even more surprised when the chief asked Brianna if she had forgotten that she and she were having dinner together tonight. The girl just couldn't get it into her head how he could say such a thing with so many ears around. God, Brianna didn't know where to look. However, the girl quickly thought of something to say. That's right. We were going to discuss this month's plan. I must have forgotten. I apologize. The girl smiled awkwardly. Jonathan replied that there was nothing wrong with that and invited the girl to walk to his car in that case. Yes. Brianna could only reply and followed the chief. Oh God, what do you mean, yes? The girl berated herself for every word she said, and only Pitt stood as if lost. He was more surprised than anyone else. He just looked at the chief and Brianna, wondering why they were suddenly going to have dinner together. Meanwhile, Jonathan and Brianna were already in the elevator. He was standing so close. The girl furtively glanced at the chief and thought, as it was, and as awkward as she felt, thanks to this man, she had managed to avoid the worst of it. Now a feeling of unexpected joy swept over Brianna. The girl exulted that Pitt, who thought that no one but he wanted her, had heard it from the chief. Now she, who a few minutes ago had looked like a loser in his eyes, would be dining with a man who was 1,000 times better than Pitt. And now they're down to the underground parking lot. Jonathan walked ahead. Suddenly he realized that Brianna had stopped. What's wrong? The man turned and asked Brianna what was wrong. The girl stated that she wasn't actually going to have dinner with him. Are you going to take the elevator and go back to the first floor? Jonathan asked. Brianna looked at the chief excitedly. Jonathan savvy, because that's where she might run into Pitt Wesley again. Well, there was some truth to what he said. Brianna didn't want to meet that bastard again, so she had to ask if the chief could give her a ride to the subway station. But he asked again if she wouldn't meet Pitt if she took the subway home. Jonathan remarked that he'd heard about Pitt Wesley taking the subway home. Brianna wondered when he'd heard about it, and more importantly, where he'd heard about it. The chief walked to his auto and gallantly opened the passenger door, inviting Brianna to get in. Get in the car, Mrs. Woods, Jonathan said, seeing the girl's indecision. Slowly the evening was approaching. The girl thanked the chief and got into his car after all. They drove off. Already during the trip, Brianna wondered to the chief if he had done it on purpose. But Jonathan replied that that was what he had originally intended to do. Brianna got an answer to her question. There was an awkward silence in the car. Although it wasn't easy, thank you, Brianna said, overcoming her embarrassment. Jonathan sighed and turned to the girl. Brianna looked at the chief and noticed that he looked a little worried. Please, if Deputy Wesley bothers you again, tell me, Jonathan asked. To whom? You? Brianna said in surprise. She seemed to have lost her mind around the chief, and she didn't always know what to say. Human resources, Jonathan replied, and Brianna simply agreed without even thinking about what he said. Then the man smiled faintly. Jonathan added that, if necessary, he could be told too. A man stopped outside some cafe. The place was crowded. Brianna and Jonathan sat down at a free table. Brianna was not herself. She was blushing and turning pale. This was an environment she'd never thought she'd be in with the chief. For some reason, the man's words kept running through her head about telling him if Pitt suddenly started hitting on her again. After all, there in the car, Brianna answered Jonathan that everything was fine. The girl pointed out that the chief must have a lot of work to take care of. She added that their human resources department wasn't like a teacher's office for snitching on coworkers. Jonathan then explained that his such a request was due to the fact that he simply wanted to protect Brianna. Jonathan once again implored Brianna to be sure to let someone know if Deputy Wesley or anyone else bothered her. Brianna just couldn't believe Jonathan had said all that to her without a change in his face. I heard you wanted to come here. Jonathan suddenly interrupted Brianna's thoughts. Oh, how did he know about that? Before the girl could ask that question, Jonathan explained that he had heard about it when the girl was talking to Principal Lara Sim. Wow, the food just arrived. What a flavorful seafood dish. Truth be told, Brianna didn't feel like eating because she was still tense about Pitt Wesley. However, out of nowhere, the girl got an appetite from just looking at the dish she brought. That visual that you can't do anything about. But suddenly, there's an appetite that wasn't there. Damn, that food looks delicious! Jonathan wished Brianna a pleasant appetite. The girl blushed instantly, and thanking the chief, wished him the same. Brianna carefully took each bite with her chopsticks. She seemed to literally enjoy eating, savoring slowly and chewing thoroughly. Her taste buds were just bursting with a spectrum of flavors. Brianna was ready to cry. So delicious was the food here. Jonathan could not help but notice the change in Brianna's mood. He could see that she liked the food and that she enjoyed every bite. The man smiled contentedly. Is it good? He asked. And Brianna answered without a second thought that it was delicious. Immediately, the girl coughed awkwardly, mentally berating herself for being too excited. What the girl felt at that moment began to excite her even more. It was strange, but the food made Brianna suddenly feel thirsty. Jonathan asked her if she was going to have a drink tonight. Brianna flinched at his question. God, was he reading her mind? Out loud, she just wondered why. The chief replied that he thought she always drank at company dinners. That answer satisfied her. Brianna decided to ask what about him, but the chief said he couldn't because he was driving. Taking the initiative, Jonathan asked the waiter to bring them a drink. Once again, Brianna was surprised. Wow, he had ordered the exact brand she always drinks. But how could he know that? The chief looked at the girl in surprise. She looked very puzzled. What? He asked, catching Brianna's perplexed look. Nothing, the girl replied and lowered her gaze. Yeah, it all got me thinking. The chief knows that Brianna wanted to come here and that she's always drinking. In fact, the rest of the staff knows it too. But the fact that the leader knew about it seemed very strange to Brianna. Finally, the drinks Jonathan had ordered arrived. Brianna was embarrassed in front of the chief for only pouring for herself. The girl looked at Jonathan for a second. What is it? He looked thoughtfully at the girl without averting his eyes. I wonder what he's thinking. Why is he staring so intently and silent? Brianna was uncomfortable. So awkward. She couldn't think of anything to talk about. And now the chief wasn't drinking. The girl looked puzzled at the chief, then at her filled glass. Jonathan picked up his water glass and clinked it against Brianna's glass. There was the sound of glass. Just in case you're suddenly bored, Jonathan said with a smile. Brianna thanked the chief. She really was grateful for a lot of things. For the elevator incident with Pitt, and for the ride, and now just for trying to create a warm atmosphere. But she was still thirsty. Brianna emptied her glass in seconds. Having had enough to drink and quench her thirst, Brianna exhaled and set the glass on the table. Jonathan remarked that it had been worth it to bring her here. The girl blushed instantly at those words and asked the chief to ignore her. "Drink in comfort," he replied calmly. Except when he said that, Brianna felt even more uncomfortable. Jonathan asked if Brianna would drink soju. She replied that she was even more thirsty for soju today, and the boss immediately poured soju into her shot glass. "I'm sorry I'm the one who drinks alone," the girl admitted and added that she's not a big fan of the drink anyway. But Jonathan suddenly decided to confess that he liked to watch Brianna drink. The confession made her choke on her drink. Wiping her mouth, she dumbfoundedly asked the chief what he was suddenly talking about. The chief replied that he was just talking about his impression, but Brianna indignantly asked him to stop teasing her. "Besides, Mrs. Woods is usually an elegant eater, to the point where I feel satiated when I watch you eat," Jonathan continued to say. "Please don't say things like that without changing your face!" Brianna finally became indignant. I wonder if it's been like this before. Is he always this good at sweet-talking? Yeah, her ex-Pit always talked about Brianna eating a lot and risking gaining weight. The guy constantly reproached her with the fact that other girls, unlike her, eat little because they care about their figure. The chief is the exact opposite of that walking nothingness. Thinking about it, the girl drank another shot. The chief asked Brianna not to drink so quickly. He was worried that it might give her an upset stomach, but Brianna quietly admitted that she just really wanted a drink tonight. "Okay," the chief agreed. Well, want is a thing, especially since she was under his control today. So Brianna knocked back shot after shot. It was obvious that she wanted to drown out the pain and sadness in her soul with a drink. Jonathan said it wasn't something to be sad about. Brianna stared at the man. She was struggling now with common sense and the desire to share her pain and pour out her soul. What to do? The girl didn't know if she should open her soul to this man. Jonathan waited silently. He understood that she wanted to speak out, but he also understood that she had to decide for herself if she wanted to talk to him about it. The man was patient and gave Brianna time, and the girl decided he could be trusted after all. "Honestly, I thought. Our relationship was good. He was my first boyfriend from the same company as me," Brianna began her story. The girl admitted that she had been thinking about her and Pitt getting married and starting a family. Brianna couldn't understand why things were suddenly like this, or where she had taken a wrong turn. Jonathan listened silently as she spoke. Yes, Brianna's eloquence and frankness could be attributed to the amount she had drunk that night, but the girl was sure she hadn't started talking about it because she was drunk. Brianna told her boss what she should have told a very close friend. That night, she just wanted to vent the emotions she had been holding in. Yeah, ironic, to say the least. "Brianna Woods, you're a good person," Jonathan stated. The boss also remarked that the girl always does everything well, and he has never seen her do anything wrong. Brianna wondered if she had ever heard something like that from Supervisor Farmer. Probably not. It was the first time. Oh, yes. And Brianna herself also thought that Jonathan did everything right. In her mind, she noted that she had never seen the chief do anything wrong either. She didn't say it out loud, but simply thanked the man. As she continued to be candid, the girl suddenly admitted that she actually felt so pathetic. Brianna didn't understand why she dreamed of a future with a guy like Pitt. The girl surrendered to the question. Could she have avoided this if she had been a more reasonable person? "In that case, you might meet another man who will love you unconditionally," Jonathan stated suddenly. The girl stared at him in surprise. The chief clarified that he meant someone like himself. Then he began to say that the sooner he and Brianna started dating, the less time would be wasted. He assured that the girl would be able to forget about her wounds and bad memories with him. The already tipsy girl replied that she did not understand the fact that Mr. Jonathan could fall in love with her. "Honestly, you've never shown that you're interested in me," she quipped. And Jonathan replied that he wasn't really the type to show interest in someone he loved. In addition, he said that he was actually going to confess to Brianna after he returned from a business trip from the USA last year. However, when he returned, it turned out that the girl had already dated. Having said that, Jonathan fell silent. He then suggested that the girl go for a walk. Brianna couldn't believe that the manager had been interested in her for a long time. Yes, it was simply unbelievable. He and the chief walked out of the cafe together. Brianna walked behind Jonathan and thought about everything he had told her. Ah, this isn't a dream, is it? But if it's not a dream, then what happens in the future? Oh, the girl suddenly staggered. But Jonathan didn't let her fall and caught Brianna with a deft movement of his hand. As it happened, they found themselves face to face in front of each other. Their eyes met. Being in such incredible proximity to his face, Brianna suddenly realized clearly how beautiful he was. Oh yes, right now, she thought, he was beautiful. Mr. Farmer, I can't help but compare you and Wesley, Brianna said. The girl admitted that at first Pitt also told her that he would protect her. Jonathan gently pulled the girl to him. They became even closer. The man stated that if Brianna couldn't believe it, she could use him instead of Pitt. The girl was surprised and replied that she couldn't do that as she had never thought of doing something like that. Then what am I to do? I can't open my heart and show it to you, Jonathan remarked anxiously. Though the man realized that it would be confusing now, he nevertheless asked the girl to give him a chance to make her happier than anyone else. Right now there's a chasm between us, and I can't let that happen, he added quietly. He seems to be talking quite seriously. Brianna couldn't know for sure if he was speaking sincerely or not. But right now it was just falling apart over this chasm, and Jonathan Farmer dived headfirst into that abyss.